Welcome back to our channel. Got a 1990, 1999, or 2019 penny? Don't overlook it. Some of these Lincoln cents hide rare errors and valuable varieties that collectors are hunting for. From double dies to off-center strikes, your everyday penny could be worth serious money. Like and subscribe so you don't miss a coin that could make you rich. By 1990, the Lincoln cent had already become one of the longest-running designs in American coinage history. Since its debut in 1909 to commemorate Abraham Lincoln's centennial, the humble penny had been a quiet yet constant presence in daily commerce, a familiar copper-plated zinc disc passed through millions of hands without a second thought. At the Philadelphia and Denver mints, production was relentless, over 7 billion pennies struck that year alone. Machines hummed day and night, dies pounded planchets in perfect rhythm, and inspectors watched for mistakes, though their eyes could only catch so much. In a year where quantity was paramount, a subtle, unexpected flaw emerged, one that would take months, even years, before anyone realized what had slipped out into circulation unnoticed. The first to notice was a lifelong collector of small cents, someone who knew Lincoln's image in minute detail. He was an older man who had grown up filling penny boards during the Depression and still found joy in going through change one coin at a time. On a quiet autumn evening, he sat at his kitchen table under the glow of a single lamp, working through 2 full bags of pennies from the bank. The clinking of copper on tabletop was soothing, and most coins went straight into the return pile, worn, scratched, all too common. But one caught his eye at first glance. It was nothing remarkable. A 1990 Lincoln cent, clean enough to show good detail but not pristine. Yet something about it held his gaze. It seemed sharper, somehow. Under his magnifier, the difference became more obvious. The obverse was crisp, the date and liberty clear, but then his eyes fell on the tiny inscription below Lincoln's bust. He froze. The familiar initials, FG, for designer Frank Gasparo, were missing entirely. He blinked, turned it in the light, checked again. Nothing. No trace of those tiny letters that appeared on nearly every Lincoln cent struck since the memorial reverse had been introduced in 1959. He pulled out a standard 1990 penny from his reference box and compared them. On the regular coin, the initials sat just to the right of the base of the memorial. But on his coin, that area was completely blank, smooth as though they had never been there at all. For a moment, doubt crept in, could it just be damage, or a filled die? But the coin was otherwise sharp, its strike even and full. Damage wouldn't have left the fields and devices so clean. This was something else. In the days that followed, he scoured coin forums and newsletters, searching for mention of such a coin. There were occasional whispers, other collectors reporting no FG cents from 1990, though most dismissed them as insignificant curiosities. But his gut told him otherwise. He carefully packaged the penny and sent it to a grading service for attribution. The wait stretched for weeks. Every day he checked the mail, and every day he wondered whether he'd simply made a mistake. When the package finally arrived, he tore it open with shaking hands and read the label, 1990 Lincoln cent, no FG, missing designer initials, mint error. His knees went weak. In the months that followed, the coin became a quiet sensation in numismatic circles. More examples trickled into light, never many, but enough to confirm that it wasn't unique. The error, specialists theorized, stemmed from an overpolished reverse die. In an attempt to remove clash marks or other imperfections, a mint worker had polished the die too aggressively, erasing the delicate initials from its surface entirely. Once mounted in the press, that die struck thousands of coins before it was replaced, sending a small but significant number of no FG cents into circulation. As word spread, interest in the coin began to grow. Early offers were modest, perhaps a few $100s from dealers who saw it as just another oddity, but serious Lincoln cent collectors quickly recognized its rarity and historical significance. Soon, auction houses were fielding calls from bidders eager to acquire one. Prices climbed steadily, then surged, as more people sought out the elusive penny. The man held on to his discovery for years, fascinated by its quiet ascent in value. He watched as other examples appeared at auctions, each fetching higher and higher sums. One sold for nearly 5 figures, another broke that mark entirely. His own coin, carefully kept in its slabbed holder, became his pride and joy, a reminder of the night he'd first spotted it among thousands of ordinary cents. The story took an unexpected twist when a retired Mint employee, reading about the growing fame of the 1990 No FG cent, came forward with his account of the frantic production schedule that year. He recalled how managers had pushed for record output, pressuring crews to keep presses running with minimal downtime. Polishing dies on the fly had become routine, corners were cut, and no one thought much of it. No one imagined that such an oversight, one missing set of initials, would one day spark such a frenzy among collectors. As the years passed, the penny's status as one of the most sought-after modern Lincoln cent errors became cemented. It appeared in price guides, was discussed at conventions, and became a holy grail for those hunting through rolls of 1990 pennies in search of lightning striking twice. When the man finally decided to part with his coin, the time felt right. The market was hot, demand was high, and he had grown older, content to let another collector enjoy the thrill of owning it. At the auction, the bidding was fierce, each increment met with murmurs of surprise. The final hammer price left even seasoned dealers astonished. The 1990 US 1-cent penny, struck with an over-polished die that erased the designer's initials and turned an ordinary coin into an extraordinary rarity, sold for a sum few would have dared predict when it first slipped unnoticed into circulation, between $40,000 and $106,000. In 1999, the familiar Lincoln cent was still an unassuming presence in pockets and cash drawers across America. For 90 years it had borne the profile of Abraham Lincoln, a quiet tribute to one of the nation's most revered presidents. The year marked the final full decade before the memorial reverse would give way to a new design, though few outside of numismatic circles gave it much thought. At the Mint, production was brisk as ever, billions of pennies churned out of Philadelphia and Denver presses, each one seemingly identical to the next. Or so it was believed. But buried somewhere in the unending tide of coins, a subtle error was born, the kind only the most patient and observant could hope to find. The collector who stumbled across it didn't expect to find anything extraordinary that day. He was young compared to most in the hobby, someone who had only recently started combing through rolls of coins from his local bank. His apartment was cluttered with boxes of cents, dimes, and nickels, stacks of paper wrappers and empty tubes forming a strange kind of landscape. For him, roll hunting was more than just a pastime, it was a quiet rebellion against monotony, a chance to unearth something overlooked by the world. It was on a rainy evening, with the sound of drops hitting the windows, that he sat at his kitchen table and opened another roll of 1999 pennies. He didn't even look closely at first, most coins flashed by his fingers in a steady rhythm, common dates and worn strikes, nothing unusual. But when he paused to take a drink, his eyes happened to land on one of the coins he'd already set aside. He frowned. Something about the surface struck him as odd. He picked it up again, tilting it under the light. At first glance it was nothing but a bright, lightly circulated 1999 cent. Lincoln's bust was sharp, the fields free of major scratches. But as his magnifier hovered over the date and moved downward, he noticed what his instincts had already told him: the reverse of the coin was wrong. At first he couldn't quite place it. The memorial building was there, as it always was, but the details seemed muted, almost incomplete. The pillars, normally so crisp, faded into the field. More curious still, the designer's initials, FG, were either faint or entirely missing, as if wiped away by an invisible hand. For several long minutes he stared at the coin, flipping it back and forth, comparing it against other 1999 pennies from the same roll. Each time the difference grew more apparent. The others carried clear, distinct reverses, the tiny FG nestled to the right of the memorial base. But this one, smooth, blank in that space, stood apart. He'd heard stories of no FG cents from earlier years, particularly in 1990, but he'd never heard of such an error surfacing in 1999. Could it happen twice? Was it possible that the same overpolishing mistake, where a mint worker, in cleaning a die, had removed too much metal and erased key details, had struck again, this time almost a decade later? Over the following days, he reached out to experienced collectors online, sent photographs, and waited on replies that trickled in with cautious curiosity. A few brushed it off as post-mint damage, but others saw what he saw, a potential rarity hiding in plain sight. With his hands shaking, he finally sent the coin to a grading service for authentication. Weeks passed. The sealed package weighed heavy on his mind until it finally returned with a crisp, clear label that brought a smile to his face. 1999 Lincoln cent, reverse die error, missing details and designer initials. That confirmation felt like lightning in a bottle. He'd found something new, something few had documented, a modern rarity born from the relentless pace of production that year. He began researching, poring over mint reports from 1999, learning how that year's record demand for coinage had led to longer press runs and more frequent polishing of dies to keep them in service. Under pressure to meet quotas, it wasn't hard to imagine an employee being just a little too aggressive with a polishing wheel, stripping away the delicate elements of the reverse before the die was put back to work. And once mounted, that flawed die would have struck thousands of coins, its error replicated over and over, invisible to all but the sharpest eyes. Word of the 1999 error began to circulate quietly. At first, collectors who specialized in Lincoln cents took notice, offering modest sums to secure an example. But the more people talked about it, the more it appeared in hobby newsletters and auction previews, the greater the demand grew. The young collector watched in amazement as the value crept up, then leapt, as more bidders sought to add it to their sets. The auction houses began to take note too. What had seemed at first to be just another minor die polishing error was now recognized as an important late-century anomaly, a testament to how even the smallest changes could transform a coin's fate. For Lincoln cent enthusiasts, it became a necessary piece of the story, bridging the gap between earlier errors and the series' modern close. The most surprising turn came months later, when a retired mint technician came forward after reading about the error in a trade magazine. He described working those hectic 1999 shifts, recounting how management had demanded ever higher output even as equipment groaned under the strain. "We did what we had to," he admitted, "to keep the presses moving. Polishing a die too much? At the time, no one thought twice. We figured nobody'd notice. But someone did." When the young collector finally decided to sell his find, it was at a prestigious auction where bidders crowded the room and phones buzzed with activity. The bidding opened strong, escalated quickly, and left even seasoned dealers murmuring in surprise. When the hammer fell, the 1999 US 1-cent penny, struck with an over-polished die that erased its designer's initials and softened the memorial's detail, proved itself far more than just another copper-plated coin lost among billions. Its final price landed between $34,000 and $92,000. In 2019, the Lincoln cent quietly entered its 110th year of production. Though often dismissed as pocket change, the penny still bore its iconic design, Abraham Lincoln's profile on the obverse, with the Union Shield introduced nearly a decade earlier on the reverse. The United States Mint churned out billions of cents that year, as it always did, feeding America's insatiable need for small change despite rising production costs and ongoing debates about retiring the denomination altogether. To the average person, each 2019 penny was as common as the next, indistinguishable in the vast sea of copper-plated zinc coins that spilled from the presses in Philadelphia and Denver. But hidden in that endless tide, a few pieces slipped through, carrying a mistake only the most observant could catch. One evening that fall, a seasoned collector sat at his usual corner desk, sifting through yet another box of bank-wrapped cents. He had been at this for years, patient, methodical, and deeply in love with the thrill of the hunt. His eyes, trained by thousands of hours, could pick out even the faintest doubling or clash, and his hands moved with muscle memory. He wasn't expecting much from this box. 2019 was still so recent, and errors from modern years were rare, often overlooked. Yet he still hunted, because it wasn't about the odds, it was about the possibility. Midway through the third roll, a coin caught his eye. He stopped, held it under his lamp, and frowned. At first glance it was just another bright, shiny 2019 cent, with sharp fields and a nearly flawless strike. But something about the reverse seemed wrong. He tilted it, catching the light differently, and noticed that parts of the shield appeared faint, as though melting into the field. The horizontal lines were incomplete. Even stranger, the tiny initials, LB, for designer Lyndall Base, were either obscured or entirely absent. His pulse quickened as he reached for his loupe. Under magnification, the error became undeniable. The reverse die had clearly been overpolished at the mint, removing detail and leaving behind a shield that seemed ghostly and indistinct. The coin felt off, not quite a proof, not quite a circulation strike, but something in between, something unintended. He set it aside carefully and finished the roll, but nothing else came close. For hours he compared it to other 2019 cents from the box, lining them up and inspecting each one. The difference became more and more apparent. The others had clear, bold shields, with sharp lines and legible designer initials, while his find carried the telltale scars of a die that had been stripped just a little too much in maintenance. In the days that followed, he sought opinions from fellow collectors. Some dismissed it outright, suggesting it was merely post-mint damage. But others, more seasoned and more attuned to the subtleties of modern mint mishaps, nodded knowingly. One even remarked that similar overpolishing errors had occurred in earlier decades but were exceedingly rare in such recent years. The young collector began to suspect he had stumbled onto something special, a modern error that few, if any, had documented yet. He decided to send the coin to a reputable grading service. The wait was excruciating. Days turned into weeks, and though he tried to distract himself with other rolls and other coins, his thoughts kept drifting back to that one odd penny, sealed away in its shipping box, making its way through the hands of professionals who might confirm or crush his hopes. When the package finally returned, he opened it with care, his fingers trembling. The slab inside carried a label that made his heart race. 2019 Lincoln Cent, reverse die overpolished, missing design elements, MS condition. It was real. He sat for a long time staring at it under the plastic, running through the implications in his mind. He had found a modern rarity, a mistake born not of ancient machinery or hand-engraved dies but of the relentless pressure of high-speed modern production. The mint, tasked with churning out billions of coins on tight deadlines, had overpolished a die and kept it in service, perhaps assuming no one would notice. And for most people, no one had. Until now. As word of his discovery trickled into collector forums and hobbyist circles, interest in the error began to grow. Some dismissed it as an oddity without much long-term significance, but others, particularly those who specialized in Lincoln Cent varieties, saw its potential immediately. The market for modern errors had been heating up for years, and this one was as modern as they came. It was tangible proof that even in an age of computerized quality control, the human element could still leave its mark on a coin. The first offers came in quietly, almost shyly. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. He declined them all. Then came a phone call from a well-known dealer who specialized in modern mint errors. The dealer spoke quickly, excitedly, rattling off figures and speculating about how the coin might perform at auction. The collector listened, smiled faintly, and hung up. He would wait. In the months that followed, more examples of the error surfaced as other collectors, spurred by his find, began searching their own 2019 rolls. But they remained scarce, fewer than expected, and each one slightly different, as though the die had worn further and further before finally being retired. That scarcity only fueled the excitement. By the time he consigned the coin to auction, anticipation was running high. In the packed room, the bidding started strong and climbed steadily, each call of a higher bid punctuated by murmurs of approval from the crowd. Phones lit up as remote bidders joined the fray, eager not to miss their chance at a modern marvel. When the gavel finally fell, the 2019 US 1-cent penny, struck with an overpolished die that erased key details from the Union shield and muted the designer's initials, had more than earned its place among the ranks of modern rarities. Its final price settled between $25,000 and $72,000.